Hi friends, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I'm Dr. Ritu Khosla, Assistant Professor in the Department of Political Science, MCM DAV College for Women, Chandigarh. The topic that we are going to study today is people's movement and struggles. Now friends, if we talk about the society that has changed over the period of time, and with the change over the period of time, we also see the changes in the values and the behavior of the members of the society. And when we have a clash of the new ideas with that of the old ideas, so that arises conflicts, and these conflicts, they demand for the changes in the system. When the people, they come together with a common ideology or a common aim, the change they want to bring in the system, that is a movement, that is, we can say, a social movement. So the social movement, they addresses the problems which are related to the political structure or the economic structure or the social structure of the society. And many of the movements, they also aim to have an egalitarian form of society. Now friends, if we talk about these movements, these can be organized and these can be unorganized also. Many of the movements, they are peaceful, but they can be violent in nature also. Now if we say the movement, its success is very important. So what are the reasons behind the success of a movement? First of all, these movements should be properly organized. Second one, they should be able to arise consciousness among the people. The people at a large level should become a participant to that. Now students, I will be telling you about that how this whole movement, it goes over the period of time. First of all, a consciousness arises in a particular section of a society or a particular part of a population, we can say. Now this population start raising their voice. They start talking about their feeling. They try to change the opinion of the other people also. And as their chain expands, they forms a primitive form of organization. They chalk out their agendas, what they have to do. They chalk out their program and they start with the campaigning. And with the campaigning, they start gaining the support of the other people also. So this is how the movement, it is strengthened over the period of time. And then they start pressurizing the government to listen to their, or we can say that they start pressurizing the authority to listen to their demands. Now in this stage, two things can happen. First, the demand can be accepted, and if the demand is accepted, then it will bring, we can say, the changes in the institutional structure. And if they are rejected, either the demand, or we can say either the movement, it will collapse altogether, or secondly, the change can be that they can start, they can have a fresh start for the movement. So let us start now studying about the people's movement. Objectives: to know about the concept of people's movement and struggles at large, to discuss the different type of people's movements, to mark a difference between old and new people's movements, to analyze the different approaches to the study of people's movements. Now, first of all, let us talk about the concept of people's movement. People movements are a form of collective action by the people. Collective action refers to the mobilization of a group of people putting their efforts, including struggles and strives, to achieve certain collectivity, shared goals or values held as important for society. People movements are understood as organized collective efforts working towards achieving changes. This leads to a simple but theoretically pertinent question: why has the idea of people's movement emerged at all? It seems that it has something to do with the resurgence of the concept of civil society under the impact of global world order, in which socialism has been marginalized. Notably, the concept of civil society has undergone a radical change. All social movements have an ideology to identify what is wrong with the present and what needs to be done in the future. The history of people's movement in India has been a very old one. Whenever the people gave preferences to change in the society, there have always been conflicting movements and struggles against the state and the prevalent system. These movements have been sometimes for or against change. The changes brought about by such movements have been in the social, political, and economic sectors and have direct repercussions on the people. When we view the people's movement in the area of political reformation, it is here that the people's movement have played a very important role. In the modern period too, the people's movements have brought about considerable changes. For example, the French and Russian revolutions, the Indian freedom movement, etc. If we view these movements and struggles carefully, it will come to the forefront that people have played an important role in these movements. However, here we will not be discussing about the independent movements, but we would be discussing those movements which were fought at the nethermost level by the people to do away with the hardships that were prevalent in the society. In the three elements as their first collective action, second social change, and third common purpose. Now let us talk about the essential features of the people's movement. A people's movement is characterized by the following essential features. First, based on objective, people's movement is determined by their ends and goals. Social conflict is essentially an interactional concept. It presupposes the existence of two or more individuals or groups, caste, communities, and classes in a situation of opposing claims and contestations about some issues, goals, and objectives. As an adversarial concept, conflict always involves the elements of struggle, strife, and active effort of one group to exclude or cancel the claim of another group over some values, object, or goal. Second, collective mobilization. A people's movement is characterized by collective efforts and not just by an individual's effort. It is thus a collective task rather than an individual's task. It is not compulsory, it organized, but it should be able to create interest and awakening of large number of people. It is, however, not necessary that the collective efforts of the movement are well synchronized, but it should have the capacity to mobilize the people for a cause. A people's movement is never a scattered event, but it is a continuous effort that gives it a form of a movement. It has a definite direction so as to bring about a change. The change sought could be comprehensive or sometimes merely minute adjustments. Fourth, ideology and identity. Most of the movements have an ideological backing, and it is this ideology that connects people and motivates them to achieve a common goal. Some examples of the new social movements include the gay rights, environmental, women's, and ethnicity identity movements in the post-60 era. Further, a people's movement cannot take the form of an organization, like that of a governmental or a private organization. A movement is mostly a loose and unofficial group, and it is this feature that leads to various difficulties on the way of achieving success. Further, talking about the people's participation, there is an active people's participation in a movement, and this participation is voluntary. The people participate so as to protect their common interest. Seventh, by means of a movement, a feeling of newness is imbued within the people in a society. And lastly, many of these new people's movements have been more concerned with the civil society rather than targeting the state. Instead of focusing on the change in state policies, their aim is to bring about change in the culture and lifestyle of the people. Now we will be discussing about the types of the people's movements. There is no single definition of people's movement. There was a long-term process to shift from old people's to new people's movement. A people's movement can be seen from many perspectives. The old people's movement is a class-based movement which deals with class revolution and re-established in political system. In the last few decades, India has witnessed various movements which can be classified under new people's movement. For example, students' movement, women's movement, anti-nuclear protest, gay rights, animal rights, minority nationalism, etc. New people's movement is based on identity, dignity, peace, and social justice. The emergence of new people's movement started mainly after 1950s and strived towards achieving an identity or autonomy. New people's movement comes into the two reasons. Firstly, the inability of Marxism analysis to account for the emergence and existence of known class identities. Second, the incapacity of the modernization project to cope with the discontents of modernity, that is, the failure of the liberal theory. The new people's movement are neo-Marxist structural. The following are the few important characteristics of new people's movement. First, the old people's movement had directed their collective action to state power. Movement or collective action refers to the mobilization of a group of people putting their efforts, including struggles, and strives to achieve certain collectivity, shared goals or values held as important for society. Whereas, new people's movement is concerned with individual morality but with collective morality. Second, the old people's movement was class-based. These movements subscribed to the theory that society is divided on the basis of class. The class-based hierarchy in the society played a crucial role in these movements. In the case of New People's movements, they are not class-based. They are rather multi-class. In fact, these movements do not subscribe to the theory that society is divided on the basis of class and that classes are antagonistic to each other. The new social movements are either ethnic or nationalistic and plural. Women's movement is an example of this. Further, the old people's movement were not affected or influenced by social entities such as civil society. The New People's Movement to a large extent is confined to the civil societies, which have become a necessity and a reality in the present-day world scenario. Fourth, the Old People's Movement was more concerned with economic issues of land, wages and property. The New People's Movement is no more concerned with economic issues of land, wages and property. Rather, they are primarily concerned about the issues of self-identity and autonomy of an individual and the community against the state market and its institutions. Thus, Dalit movement for dignity and the Adivasi movements for their autonomy are treated as New People's movements. Further, Old People's Movement were mainly a part of class struggle, hence involved a class of people with a definite problem. The New People's Movements are not concerned about the benefits of one class or group, but they are concerned with the larger group of everyone, irrespective of his or her class. In this sense, the environmental movements can be considered as New People's Movements as they do not raise the issue of a particular class. Some New People's Movement can be considered as grassroots or micro movements. They do not have to keep the state power as one of their agendas and are democratic in their organizational structure. They mostly are concerned with democratization in day-to-day lives and focus on communication and identity. There is no clear structure role of the participants of the new social movements as very often than not they have diffuse social status as youth, student, women, minority, professional groups, etc. Now let us talk about the issue-based movements. Sometimes the issue-based classifications treat different issues separately. Sometimes issues are conceptualized in theoretical framework such as developmental, livelihood, human rights issues or political, economic, cultural and social issues or local, regional and national issues. This type of movements have emerged at any time in the society. Some of those who follow structure-functional approach classify social movements on the basis of issues around which people are mobilized. People do not get mobilized around number of issues from local and immediate to systematic and long-term. They vary from time to time and from society to society. For instance, the movement of damn affected people can be called as rehabilitation movement of damn affected people, and it can also be called as anti-development movement or human rights movement. Similarly, struggles of the forest dwellers can be classified into forest movement, civil rights or livelihood movement, or movement for common resources. People's movements are not only limited to bring socio-economic changes in the society, but they are also channelized to bring a change in the prevalent political structure and political institutions. For instance, right to information movement in India that democratized the state. Another powerful movement includes the Nepal Revolution in 2006 that changed the political system of Nepal completely. Monarch had to bow down before the people's demand and led to the establishment of democracy in the state. In the present times, movements are also global in its nature. The issues like human rights, ecology, terrorism, war, etc. are undertaken at the international platforms, generating people's support that goes beyond the national boundaries. The advent of globalization has seen the emergence of various people's movements, like workers' movements for safeguarding their interests vis-a-vis the industrialists, and the people's movement to protect the environment that got adversely affected because of the overexploitation of resources. Few such movements include Chipko movement, Swadhyay movement, Rally for Rivers, etc. Students, we will be studying the approaches to the study of people's movements. If the facts are collated together and observed carefully, various explanations to the facts can be arrived. Similarly, the people's movement too can be constructed and interpreted in various different ways, depending upon the theoretical perspective from which one looks at the phenomena. There is no single method to describe the movement. Thus, for a better understanding of people's movement and the processes involved within, various theoretical approaches can be brought to use. As mentioned above, there are various perspectives on the basis of which people's movement can be understood better. These are as follows. Traditional approach is mainly based on the theories of Karl Marx, Emil Durkheim, and of enlightened philosophers like John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, and especially Adam Smith. According to Marxist approach, the people who involve themselves in various movements want a revolutionary change in the society. Now I would be discussing about the Marxist approach, structural functional approach, Gandhian approach, relative deprivation theory, resource mobilization theory, and strain theory. Now first of all, the Marxist approach. As Marx stated in his paper Communist Manifesto, the entire history is a consequence of various class struggles and conflicts. Various kinds of conflicts are visible in the society. Some conflicts are between the individuals for personal gains that can be achieving power. Some are due to one's style of functioning, mainly between the communities on the basis of ethnicity, social status, religion, region, and the other conflicts are around material interests and the domination of one over the other. However, the nature of non-class conflict varies from society to society and can be resolved through negotiations and institutional mechanisms. Now another approach is the structural functional approach. Structural functional approach is a liberal non-Marxist approach that lays emphasis on social and political changes in the society. Through this approach, people's movements are systematically analyzed and it does not support revolutionary change. Though the liberals do not favor revolutionary change in the political and economic structures, they advocate political change, which is confined to change in government and political institutions. At times, they do talk about revolutionary changes, but not to the extent at which the Marxists emphasize on class struggle. The followers of structural functionalism base themselves on the issues of people's movement, which enables them to mobilize the people around the concerned issue. Sometimes, the issues can be conceptualized in a theoretical framework such as developmental issues, the issue of livelihood, human rights issues, or political, economic, cultural, and social issues, or also local, regional, and national issues. Okay, the students, the next approach we will study now is the Gandhian approach. Mahatma Gandhi led the movement for freedom against British rule in the pre-independent India. The nature of the freedom struggle was more like a putting pressure on British government by Congress till 1919. But with the coming of Mahatma Gandhi, India's freedom struggle movement changed into the mass movement. For instance, the non-corporation movement against British government was a people's movement where people, despite of their caste, class, and region, took active part in it. This was the movement where Indian women also took part in large number. Not only this, rather other movements launched by Mahatma Gandhi were people's movements, which were against British government and compelled them to leave the country through non-violent means. However, in the post-independence period also, various movements were led which were people-centric. Here, if we consider the ideology of Mahatma Gandhi, he was totally against the introduction of westernization and industrialization in Indian society. According to Gandhiji, there were no conflicts in the society, but the conflict was between the classes for economic and social gains. The ideologies adopted by Gandhiji in his people's movements were that of ahimsa, satyagraha, and non-violence, which is popularly known as Gandhian ideology. In current phenomena also, this ideology is quite relevant. For instance, the recent movement against corruption was based on Gandhian ideology of non-violence. Further, we will be discussing about the resource mobilization theory. Resource mobilization theory is an outcome of rational choice theory. It is based on the assumption that individuals' actions are motivated by goals that express their preferences. They act within the given constraints and available choices. It is not possible for all individuals to get all that what they want. They must make choices within the available possibilities at a given point of time. Rational choice theories argue that individuals must make a rational choice regarding what is best for them in a situation and accordingly anticipate and calculate the outcome of their actions. To quote, rational individuals choose the alternatives that is likely to give them the greatest satisfaction, unquote. Some of the proponents of this theory argue that social movements for revolutionary changes by the marginal sections is out of the impulse and emotion. Therefore, they do not sustain for long and fail. It was called resource mobilization theory because the theory purported to show that the success of a movement depended on the resources available to be used. These resources arose from inducing individuals to participate and contribute to the cost. Individuals participate because they see the benefits to be derived from joining. Success also depends on the movement being able to link to other networks of groups and organizations. The resource mobilization theory's stress was wholly on the strategy to make the movement succeed in demanding for a change in government policies or legislation. Thus, it is sometimes said that the theory focused on political action or the realm of politics rather than on civil society. The another theory that we are going to discuss now is relative deprivation theory. The relative deprivation theory could be viewed from two perspectives, namely social conflict and social mobility. Using this theory, Morton and Runchen has tried to analyze problem of inequality, that is political, economic and social justice. According to this theory, the change or movement is brought about when a fraction or a group of individuals are deprived from certain rights, and when these groups come together or connect, then it gives rise to the struggle. The formation of the movement takes place only when there is a leadership which takes the struggle to the next level. Example of this includes Dravidian movement in India, Black movement in the United States, and women movement for political rights in the United Kingdom. Students, the next theory that we will be discussing now is the strain theory. Strain theory was proposed by Smeltzer. According to this, he attributed structural strain as a reason for the collective behavior. Structural strain is an integral part of norms, values, mobilization, and situational facilities. According to Smeltzer, social movements are based on structural and functional framework. According to his theory, whenever there is a strain in a system, the part of the system will start functioning. Smeltzer considered deprivation also as a part of the strain, but strain theory differs from the relative deprivation theory. The relative deprivation theory enforces the role of conflict in bringing change, but does not lead to any malfunctioning in the system. Contrary, the strain theory is implemented, it would lead to malfunctioning in the system. Okay friends, let us conclude now what we have studied till now. Now if we talk about the people's movement, or we can say the progressive movement or the social movements, they are the one which has been able to change the structure of the society. They are the one which is leading the change in the whole world. These movements, they have deepened the democratic setup in the various countries. And further, if we talk about the people's movement, we had done that is divided or classified in the two types, the old people's movement and the new people's movement. Old people's movement was the one which dealt with the class structure, and the new people's movement is the one which is related with a particular cause, like the LGBT rights, we have the animal rights, the protection of the environment, and so on. Now friends, if we talking about the people's movement, the whole thing, it doesn't depend upon the movement, it rather depends that how the movement has taken place. The ultimate result is the success of the movement, and the success of the movement is only possible if the people, they contribute to the system, if they contribute to this movement with wholeheartedly. Furthermore, if we talk about that, at the present time we have seen a large number of people's movement which have emerged over the period of time. And one of the main reasons behind this is the spread of education among the masses. And secondly, they are provided with the freedom of speech and expression that gives them the chance to come up their viewpoints, to express their emotions, and so on. So overall, if we talk about the people's movement, it is centered around the people. It depends upon the participation of the people. People are the main agents of the transformation in the whole world. Thank you.